Okay, so we're seven generations people. That means that what we do now, we do it based upon its impact. 7 generations down the road, it takes a lot of individualism and selfishness out of the equation. What they have done deserves nothing less than righteous rage. Okay, so I mean, if you stepped on my shoe and pushed me, that doesn't deserve righteous rage. Okay, that may deserve settling, but that doesn't deserve me going off on you, all of your relatives, your wife, your children, everybody who has your name, your entire city. It doesn't deserve that. What they have done for sane people deserves whatever it takes to keep them from doing that to anybody else. I remember this old guy who, it's amazing the number of old black people who are clear, but they know they're not going to be listened to. And some of them say, well, I shouldn't be saying it because, the Bible, blah, 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 blah. I shouldn't be saying or thinking these things, but they know. This old man I got into a discussion with him somehow about whether aliens created the pyramids or what have you. We were just playing around with words. And he stopped and he said, we have to stop them from exploring space because they're going to do the same thing to whoever they find out there that they did to us. And that was the end of the conversation. And I was just, I'm like stunned. Number one, this came out of his mouth. But number two, the logic of that, the clarity. We can't let them do this. So how do you stop them from doing that? That's the level of thinking that warriors need to be at. How do you stop them from doing this? How do you stop them from turning the world completely and totally into them so that we're cheering them as they go out and do that? How do we stop that? And righteous rage is part of that process. Because when you reach the point where you are righteously enraged, then that's where your thinking goes also, your planning goes also, your vision goes also. You gotta stop them from doing this. I don't want my grandson to become sexualized. I don't want my granddaughter to think that if she wants to make money, she's got to become part of the porn industry. I don't want them to think that. So how do I stop that? Because I'm not big enough. Peer pressure makes me look like, nothing. So I have to change the structure of the world. I have to change the structure of how African people think. And when I do the best that I can do for that, then I can sleep at night. Because I'm only one person. You're only one person. The question is, did you do the best with your righteous rage that you could? Or did you just, let it sort of die out? No, this is supposed to, and that's what burns us out. But, sort of like that, what would you rather be, a happy slave or, whatever, or rebellious? Dead person. I'd rather be a rebellious dead person because we understand African thinking in the cycles. I'm not dead anyway. I think righteous rage is a critical concept for warriors to have because it's one of those concepts that isn't small. It encompasses everything in terms of how we think and what we do. As long as when we say righteous, we're thinking logically given the situation that we're in. Okay, righteous rage isn't me going out in the street, the first white person I see because I'm mad at white people. That ain't gonna do anything to help me. That's not gonna do anything to help us. It can hurt us. Our righteous rage needs to be intelligent. It needs to be executed in an intelligent way. Negroes are traitors. Negroes pursue the interests of Europeans even without having to be told. They look for ways to make things comfortable for Europeans. So, and it doesn't be a conscious, I'm a Negro. It's just the way that you move. And there's a distinct difference, a slight difference between Negroes and lost souls. Negroes tend to be conscious of what they do. My whole way of thinking is, how do I hurt black folks? How do I help white folks? Lost souls may hurt us by default, but they're not like trying to do this. They just want to get along. It's like people who do this against us. The problem is that they are becoming, well, they've always been a visible majority, but they're becoming a stronger visible majority. So they're becoming the norm. What is the guy who worked with or worked with the governor of Florida to change the textbooks and what's being taught, he's now in charge of or part of the committee working to establish a black museum in Florida. So you know what that's going to be about, because you know he's a Negro. You know he's working against us. You know, no matter what story, the same could be the same story, but the interpretation is going to be of us through the eyes of Europeans. Every black man or black woman who's sleeping with a European isn't necessarily a Negro. They can be caught up in the madness. But you have some who systematically want to do that. I met one at the University of Chicago who married this white woman for the purpose of giving privilege to his children. He said because he could see what's coming. He could see the fall of African people in his mind, and he wanted his children to at least be given an opportunity to live. So that was why he was sleeping with this white female. Okay, so that to me is like conscious work. The person who at work does everything to undermine you in front of the white boss, that's a Negro. Okay? The cop who will give the European a warning, but slap you with a ticket and a lecture, that's the Negro. Okay, so it's not just because you're in a supervisory position. There was a postal worker here at our local post office. She retired a number of years ago, and I saw her because I would be at the post office pretty much every day. She treated the black folks like crap. Don't you know that you're supposed to put your zip code on here? That kind of stuff. White person come up to the line, hi, how you doing? Haven't seen you in a while, blah, blah, blah. And when she left, and black folks knew what she was about. When she left, she came back one day, and I happened to be there. She came back, people will retire from a job or whatever, and they'll come back to visit every once in a while. She came back, and nobody would speak to her. Co-workers, none of the people in the office. She looked at me, I just looked back at her. Okay? So that to me is like Negro, but of course that's also to me the way Negroes need to be treated. They're inside the community. They use what I call the race card, where they will say in their minds and to you through their words that because I'm black like you, I can tell you how to think. I can tell you what to do. When I say race card, that's what I mean. They're the ones that if a race of black aliens came here and found out what Europeans had done to us, they will be the ones who would be hiding the Europeans, standing in front of the Europeans with guns against the aliens. That's them. Because we can see. I have known a few people who have become centered, who left being centered. To me, that's like the equivalent of a retired Black Panther. If we're not free, then retirement can't be part of the equation. So they were never there in the first place. But if you are truly centered, then you see clearly. It will help you in many ways to see who you can explain what to. Okay, so there are people who you're not going to waste your breath on because you know that that's a waste of your time. Being centered allows you to realize that this person's asking the same question over and over again, which means that they're not really trying to learn. They're just trying to pretend like they're doing something or be involved in it in some way. When you are satisfied with your life because you know that you're doing the work that you were called here to do to the best of your ability, that's a major part of being centered. Okay, so for us, it's not all of the books, it's all the right books. It's not being popular. So many folks, know our name, that's not it. It's being popular with the warriors. Where the warriors know who you are, and you know that they're there, you just can't see them all the time. Those are the things that make you do the opposite of crying. We traveled to Savannah a good number of years ago, and what we will tend to do is we'll try to set up a lecture with a vacation, and we'll do the lecture, and part of the money from the lecture will go for that vacation. We're going to take it in that same place. Some of the mamas invited us to do a lecture in Savannah. We went to Savannah. We reserved a car, got a hotel room, and all the rest of this. Right? Get to the airport, and I'm walking around, and I don't see the agency. I don't know if it was Avis or Hertz or where. I didn't see their sign anywhere. So I'm walking around, and this brother walks up to me. He said, "Baba, what you doing?" And of course, say Baba to me, "Oh, okay." I said, "Well, I'm looking for such and such an agency." And he said, "No, you come here." Gave us, upgrade twice. And I'm saying, he was clear. He knew who we were in such a way that it helped him in his life. It helped him to do the work for us. And for him, he saw it as I don't like to use the word debt, but he saw, what is the African proverb? A promise is a debt. That's the African proverb. So I would have done the same thing for him because we're family. It gives you that sense of understanding. We're family. Whether I call on you or not, I know that I can. And I know that you will respond in such a way that will help to solve whatever the problem is. Being centered is a select group. It's not the entire conscious community. In fact, I'm arguing it's getting to be a smaller and smaller part of the conscious community because you got so much confusion within the conscious community. Atlanta is like a perfect example of a confused conscious community. Okay, so what you find, it also defends you. It defends you from folks who want to be African. They know to stay away from you because they know that you're about character and they know you're not playing. Okay, so they know that your first judgment of an African person is their character because you're coming out of our tradition. In our tradition, the first judgment of a person was of their character. So it shields you in a way, not just from Europeans. When you're centered, they're not even in the picture. Okay, for me, Europeans, they don't even exist. They don't exist. I stay away from where they are. I don't even need to deal with them at all. They know after the first time, don't speak, because I'm not speaking back. And I understand there are people who are centered who have to because of the environment they're in or the situation or their job. I understand it. I'm just privileged to the point where I don't have to. Okay, I can stay in this house 24/7 and not see anybody but any eye. But it protects you more so for me from those Africans who want to play those conscious games because they know that anybody who we know who knows what they're about has already told us or will warn us when they come. So we're protected by this circle, this community that understands the seriousness of what we're doing. I know you were asking about us, but we consider ourselves to be centered. So even though the circle is smaller, the circle is stronger and clear. About 6 years into Akaban Institute, the first 6 years were pretty tumultuous. We had students here who had been kicked out of the public school, fighting. We didn't care. These are our children. Talked back to mom. One boy, mom and dad were in prison. He was like in a rage, crying, hot tears every day. We had that. We had lots of that. We had more students than we should have had. And it was frustrating and it was draining on us because school didn't end at 3:30 or 6, whenever. It kept going. Then two things happened. Number one was, that was when K-Booker came out, my back went out. I had to crawl down the hallway and I kicked some students out of here. Said, I'm not doing this every day, I gotta heal. When we started, and interestingly at the same time, there were 2 other African-centered institutions in Atlanta who we didn't even know they were doing. They were kicking out students at exactly the same time we were. So something was going on spiritually, I would argue. The next year, we started out, I believe, with 6 or 7 students. All of them came from centered families. One of them was Islamic. One of them was Kemetic based. The rest of them, sort of a hodgepodge of different political orientations, but they were centered, they were clear. So we start teaching the school year, we go through the school year, and I'm pulling out, what we normally start out with. And they already know. That's centered. But we're all politically, we're all on the same plane. We're all on the same, we're all understanding Ma'afa. He may not know the name Ma'afa, but he knows what it is. And so we are politically clear and we're alive and we're kicking. And we know who the enemy is and we know our work. And we know that we're here for a reason. That's a wonderful state to be in. To know who you are, to know clearly who you are, to know who, and more specifically, I would argue for us, because we study these particular individuals, to know who Francis Cress Welsing is, to know who Amos N. Wilson is, to know who John Harry Clark, to know who Doc Ben, and when you say Doc Ben, you say it like this is family. Baba Jake for Jedi Shem Suji Hootie, Jacob Carruthers, because it's like, even though I've met this man one day for 5 minutes. That's like Baba, to be around people who are of righteous character. And anybody who steps in this direction that isn't in righteous character, they get moved out. Crystal clear. Mwalimu, okay. And anybody who's anywhere near her, and she'll sit there and she'll say, why are you talking to him? Are you sure you need to communicate with that person? Okay. Why did you take the picture with him? You know, she's like a regulator. That's centeredness in a way that most people can't imagine. They intentionally built a school facility there with a playground between the school and her. So in her old age, trying to be quiet, have some peace, every day, all day long, she's in the middle of noise. So they do so. Like, and I were talking the other day about Malcolm, how they don't stop with Malcolm. They killed all the boys. They did the same thing with Chancellor Williams. His son, Chancellor Williams' grandson was in the same, son or grandson, was in the same prison facility in the same wing as Malcolm's, same time. They didn't know each other, but they were in the same space at the same time. That's a major part of that centered thing when you have chosen, because everybody does that except for us. We'll pick it. Anybody who they throw at us is an ancestor. Anybody who Europeans approved of is an ancestor. Anybody who brought us perversion was an ancestor. And an elder in the community, he's transitioned now. He had me cracking up doing a libation. You know, so we laughing doing a libation. He had me cracking up doing a libation because he was really eloquent. He was a truck driver, and he came and he did a lecture on trucking to the students one time, and he do the libation, and he was real entertaining, you know, but he was real crystal clear on being African, and he called for one of the boys to come up. And he gave him water, the cup, and what water was left. And he said, you go pour this out on the sidewalk for those ancestors who are African, but we want them to know we don't want them in here. And that water will not fertilize, won't water anything. So we're the only people, the center, who doesn't call out the names of people whose names don't deserve to be called. So we are clear on those people. So anybody, there might be names that I call, might be names that you call that I don't know, or names that I call that you don't know, but there's this core. And even though I don't know the name of that person you call, I know that they deserve to be part of us, or you wouldn't be calling the name. But there's that core that we know. We know who these people are. And the closer you get to the center, then the more you know. So you're gonna know Andre-Amani, you're gonna know John Henry Clark, you're gonna know Chancellor Williams, you're gonna know Francis Cress Welsing, you're gonna know Ayikwe Arma, you're gonna know these people by name, and you will have ranked them in your mind according to their level of importance. All of them are important, but in terms of the importance of study, in terms of important, listening to their lectures, but particularly reading. And the vast majority of the people who I know, who are in the center, they read. They study. And whether they're locked up or out here, and these are the two comparative, they read. This guy sent me this letter. He must have been 30 something, maybe 40 something. Sent me a letter from prison. He was always asking questions of clarity, because he would have read this and that point on page such and such, this paragraph isn't making sense, and he sends me this letter and he says, I need you to help me to understand Ramani Jirugu. He said, I've only read it 8 times. And I'm like, what? You asking me, you studied this book. You had time to sit down and really digest, study, think about this book. And I think at that time I had read it maybe 2, maybe 3 times, but so like in there, he's clear. He knows exactly what's going on. And we need to be, even though I don't think anybody wants to be in there, we need people in there too. They've removed us from the schools from the early 80s through the 90s. We watched them systematically move center scholars from every college and university, except those who were like super tenured across this country. We watched them remove them from their positions, from the schools. And about this time, I believe that Jacob Carruthers was talking about intellectual maroons. You know, it's not you're not getting kicked out. Simply, you made the decision. I'm not dealing with this. I can't teach the way I need to. I can't talk to the young folks where I need to talk to the young folks. So we know that center is something special. It's powerful. It scares the living daylights out of you, girl. It scares them to no end. We need to be aware they know who we are. So our job is to deliver the word so that warriors can act on it without a visible connection, so they can't be connected to us. So when I talk to folks about secret societies, I tell them, you know, I can't do that. They know who I am. And then every one of you are going to be, so, and I know somebody, young black folks are intelligent, so I know somebody's listening. Somebody's clear on the Ma'afa. But they're just not, you know, going around telling everybody or trying to make everybody understand. So somebody's doing this work. But at the same time, somebody's have to put the idea out there. You all need to get together, form you some secret society. That's the foundation of successful empire, successful whatever. You all need to do this, or we're going to lose. Okay? Young folks lead the revolutions. We forget that. The young folks lead the revolutions. Soweto, that's a perfect example. Young folks lead the revolutions. Old folks comfortable, you know, secure, they got their vested, you know, interests. Young folks, they don't have the same fears. The same apprehensions. They're not concerned about a lot of the baloney old folks are concerned about for no reason. You know, they don't have that. And they know right from wrong. Whether they are involved in wrong or not, they know right from wrong. They just don't feel like it's profitable or beneficial, what have you. They know right from wrong. They know their people are being destroyed. They know this. They might not be able to articulate it. They might not even be able to consciously explain it to themselves. But they know something's not right. This is how, for me, our young folk know that something is wrong. They can't articulate it. I came out the military, I got an apartment, and the guy next to me was trying to befriend me. He was a cool guy, tried to befriend me. And went to his apartment, we were talking, and I noticed there was really no furnishings in his apartment. But he had this like 110-gallon fish tank. No gravel, no air filter, no plants, fake or real, you know. And this eel-like thing in there. It was probably maybe, you know, about 2 feet long. About maybe that fat around. And it's just kind of swimming around a little bit. Took out one of the goldfish. He dropped it in the water. And the goldfish was swimming, and then it stopped. It froze exactly where it was at. You could see the gills moving. You see the fins adjusting to make sure he stayed in the same spot. He froze. He knew he was dead. He knew it. And the eel slowly but surely came up, snatched him. Our young folk, in the opposite way, they know something that's wrong. They know something that's horribly wrong. They're trying to party their way out of it. You know, they're trying to eat their way out of it. They're trying to marry their way out of it. But they know something is horribly wrong. Gray race isn't going to solve the problem. There's not enough, it will take too long. And I don't think that black women are going to be willing every 2-3 years to be having a baby so that we can, you know, have this done within, you know, a few hundred years. They know something is horribly wrong. But as Darren Clark said, we need to identify those who are willing to follow the route, the African route. We need to train them. However, I would argue, in addition to that now, because of, well, COINTELPRO's gone nowhere. Because of when an animal is most threatened with death, it fights the hardest. It claws at anything, like a person who's drowning. They'll, you know, take you under. Europeans know what's happening. Andrew Hacker in Two Nations talked about how Europeans are trying to befriend Africans because they know it's over. They know it's over. They know that there are going to be some who get it. So we have to be careful when we see someone who is clear. to let them do their thing on their own without trying to turn them into one of our disciples or what have you. Because once we do that, then they're going to identify them as part of the problem. And they're going to keep their eye. They have our taxes as resources to put a man on that man. Yes, we have to be very, very, very careful with that.